Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I am super happy to be a guest designer for the month of June for Spiegelmom Scraps. And there are so many uses for sequins, but whenever I think of sequins, I think of shakers. And I love making shakers, and so I thought this is the perfect opportunity to create a shaker. I also have a lot of great tropical photos of my older daughter Danielle that I want to scrapbook, so I'm going to make a flamingo themed tropical layout. To make the flamingo shaker, I used a cut file from the Silhouette shop and I cut it out several times. I cut it out once from pattern paper from a pad called Color Splash. That's the flamingo all the way over to the left. And then I used some abandoned coral, Distress Oxide, and I inked the pattern paper flamingo. I just wanted to add a little bit more color to that. And then I also inked 2 white flamingos. And then I also cut the upper part of a flamingo without the cutout in the center out of some white pattern paper that had a little pink dot on it. And I glued that behind one of the flamingos, and that's what you're going to be able to see behind the sequins. And this will all make more sense in a moment. Then I glued the 2 remaining flamingos to each other. That's going to be the top of the shaker. And I thought that by having 2 pieces of paper glued together, it would be a little bit more sturdy, have a little bit more body to it. And even though I'm not sure you'll be able to see some of the surfaces that I'm inking, I just wanted to make sure that there was no white that was going to show through. So I inked pretty much everything with the abandoned coral. Now I'm going to create the front of the shaker pocket. So I need some acetate, and I'm using these Spiegelmom Scraps sequin shaker acetate sheets. I'm using the piece of paper that came out of the center of the flamingo, and I'm using a slick writer so that it doesn't smear. And I'm just tracing a little outside of that template, and now I'm cutting it out with some scissors. Even though it's bright blue, I made it large enough that you won't be able to see the blue once it's glued down to the outline of the flamingo. And as you can see, I'm just hand cutting this piece of acetate, but it is made to die cut and also to withstand some heat. So this is really specialty acetate for making shakers. So I glued it down to the outline of the flamingo with some glossy accents, and then I allowed it to dry. Then I used some Spiegelmom Scraps Big Mama foam tape, and you could see that I put the tape all around the area where the sequins are going, and then I also put it on the legs of the flamingo so that the top layer will be supported evenly from the top of the flamingo to the bottom. I'm filling up the shaker with a Spiegelmom Scraps sequin assortment, and it's called Scrappin Happy. It is perfect for the tropical colors that I'm going to be using on this layout. It has peaches and teals and pinks and yellows, all the colors that I'm going to be putting in this layout. I'm going to have a lot of tropical leaves on my layout. I cut all of these leaves out from the same pad that I used for the flamingo. It's called Color Splash. It's by American Crafts. I bought it a while back at Tuesday Morning, and it has just the most beautiful bright colors in it. I used quite a few different dyes to make all of these leaves. A few of the smaller ones were made with some older unbranded dyes that I had, but I made a lot of the dyes using a set called Sizzix Large Tropical dyes, and then I also used some Spellbinders Tropical Paradise dyes, and I also used a leaf dye made by Honeybee Stamps. I inked the edges of all of these leaves with either Rustic Wilderness or Abandoned Coral Distress Oxide. So this video is a little bit longer than my usual video because there are a lot of steps to this layout. Now I'm making a mixed media background, and I am using some 120-pound smooth white cardstock that I've already gessoed with some white gesso, and I'm adding some sprays to the background using the packaging technique. I use an art anthology spray. It's called Waimea Bay. I also use some Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists. I use bluebell, raspberry mint, and dragonfly wings, and they are all different shades of blue. And in the final layout, you'll see little patches of blue behind the title and also around the outside of the cluster of leaves. After each application of color, I use a heat tool and I dry the background. I think it's really important that the layers of color dry before adding another layer. That helps the different shades of blue be distinct. They don't blend into each other. And then it also helps build up the layers of color so that the colors will look a little bit richer. And a lot of these different shades of blue are not that different from each other, but there is one color that looks a little bit purpley to me, and I think that adds a little bit of dimension to the background. I let the background again dry, and then I sprinkle some water over the top, and then I roll my paper towel over the top, and that lifts up the water and a little bit of the color, and I just love the effect that gives the background. I do it every time that I use sprays on the background. Again, I let the background dry, and then I add some splatters. If you add the splatters before the background is dry, they won't be as distinct. They'll just kind of blend into the color that's already in the background, which you might want, but I wanted to have very distinct splatters on the layout. I am putting the splatters everywhere, but I'm trying to concentrate them along the edges of this large area of color. I like the way having little sprinkles of color along the edge helps to transition the large area of color into the background. Now I'm working on my title. My title is going to be Tropical Getaway, and I made the word tropical just by using a font that's from the Silhouette store, and then I welded it together so that it would be one unit. And then I also made an offset for the background so that I could put a white border around the outside of it. I'm using a dauber with some rustic wilderness, and I inked both the inside and the outside of this pattern paper title. The paper that I used to make the title is from a Recollections paper pad called Tropical Bliss. There was a beautiful pattern paper that had all kinds of tropical leaves on it, and it goes really well with the sequins that I used in the flamingo. Now I'm using some Spiegelmom Scraps Tear It tape. This is 1/8 inch double-sided tape. I was a little worried at first. I thought that maybe the tape wouldn't tear very well. I was also concerned that I wouldn't be able to get the backing off of the adhesive. That happens to me a lot with adhesives, but this tape tore very easily and there was no trouble with getting the backing off of it. It was very easy to work with. It stuck very well. It held very firmly, but when I had to peel something up that had this adhesive on it, it wasn't impossible to do. So it was just the right amount of stickiness for my project. I'm using the Rustic Wilderness again to ink the edges of the white offset. And I'm just using whatever ink is already on that dauber. I don't even have that ink pad handy. I'm also inking the inside of the letters. And when I do that, I like to ink from the back so that I don't accidentally slip and then have a big patch of ink on the front of my title. This is another Silhouette die cut. It says Getaway. I cut it out several times using my Silhouette Cameo, and now I am gluing the layers together just to make them a little thicker and make the title look a little bit more substantial. Now, this part of the title gave me a lot of trouble. I could not decide what color to make it, and the color of it changes several times as the layout goes on. Sometimes I think you just have to try things out. It's really hard for me to get around actually seeing what something looks like on the layout. Sometimes I make a good call and sometimes I'm confused and I'm not sure what'll look good, so I just try different things out. And as I glue together each one of these layers, I'm taking my time to make sure that everything is lined up. The very first color that I try out for this part of the title is a peachy salmonish color. I'm using Distress Oxide in saltwater taffy, and then I go over it with some abandoned coral. I was thinking of doing an ombre or something like that, but then I decided it would just be too much because I know that this is going to be a busy layout as it is. But then I didn't like the way that looked against the pink title. Just something about it, I didn't really like it. So I thought, let me try black. I'll add some other touches of black to the layout. And so I watered down the paint that I used to paint the word Getaway, and then I added some black splatters to the background. I'm trying to be careful about how many splatters I put down there. I wanted there to be a number of splatters, but not go too crazy with the black. I knew I wanted to add some details to the face of the flamingo, so since I already had way too much black out on my table, I thought that I would work on that while I had the black out there. So I added some white paint to the area where the eye is going to go, and then I added some pink paint a little bit further down. And then I used my brush and I tried to blend those two different areas together. I looked at a lot of photos of flamingos, and I have learned that a lot of flamingos look very different from each other. They have different amounts of color on their faces, and I'm not really sure if there are different types of flamingos. I'm guessing that there are, but I decided that I would just go with a very light color near the eye, and then pink, and then put some black at the edge of the beak. Some flamingos seem to have just a touch of black at the end of their beak, and some seem to have an almost all black beak. So I decided I would just add black until I was happy with the way that it looked. I tried to start out by just putting a little bit of paint down and then add more paint, especially when it's a dark color. Of course, it's much easier to add paint than it is to take it away. I continued to work on the paint on the flamingo's nose for a little while, and I had made an extra title that said Getaway that I painted black, but I still had the layered one that I made earlier with the coral color, so I decided to paint that black, and then I glue those two pieces together. I use a jewel and I add that to the flamingo's face to create an eye. Now I'm adding the title that says Tropical, and I add Getaway underneath it, and already I'm looking at it and thinking that that black is too dark. I think that I thought that some of the touches, like the splatters and the flamingo's nose, would help to balance out the black, but it's just too large of an area of black. So I was thinking to dull the black down a little bit. I would just add a little bit of the Distress Oxide that was on the dauber, and that is something that works in other situations when you want to dull down black, but it's not going to change the whole look of the title. So I go back to the color of the word Getaway in a little while. First, I use some Terra tape and I attach the word Tropical down to the background. And you could see there that is my photo. That's a photo of my daughter Danielle and her boyfriend Max. I printed that photo on my Canon selfie, and it measures approximately 3.5 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches tall. I use the Terra tape to attach all of these elements down to the page. Sometimes I use the 1/4 inch, and sometimes I use the 1/8 inch width. The 1/8 inch width, that worked really well on the word Getaway. And now I'm going to put a little strip of striped paper on the bottom and on the top of the layout. These strips of paper are approximately 1/4 inch. So I attach those down to the top and bottom. I thought that it would provide a nice frame or boundary for the top and bottom of the layout. And this paper came from the same paper pad that I used to make the title. I like adding little touches of pattern paper that have a lot of the colors that are on the layout in them. I just think that it helps to brighten up and bring the whole layout together. Well, I'm going to create a cluster in the upper right hand corner and in the lower left hand corner. So right now I'm adding 2 green leaves. I end up switching out the leaf on the bottom for a leaf that looks more similar to the one on the top. I want to balance the colors, so I add yellow to the top cluster, yellow to the bottom cluster. I add that big fern-like blue leaf to the top, and so I add one to the bottom, and then I continue like this, adding leaves to both of the clusters, and I want them to not look exactly the same, but to look similar and to have the same colors in them. I also wanted to make sure that the flamingo didn't stand out too much. Although I want it to be prominent, I didn't want it to be the only area on the layout that was that salmon-y color. So I added some smaller leaves to the clusters that were cut out of the same paper that the flamingo was made with. And initially I put some little leaves on the title, on the word tropical. And I don't think they look bad, but later on I decided that they were just a little bit too much. There's a lot going on this layout, so I decided that I would remove them from the title. And then I thought I would make another smaller cluster up by the head of the flamingo. So I'm slowly building that. I have a coral colored leaf there and a green colored leaf, and I will slowly add all of the colors that I have on the layout. And I just added some light pink flowers. I wanted to add some flowers to the layout, and I like the idea of adding a little bit of light pink. And then I add these very tiny green leaves behind each of the pink flowers. After looking at the layout for a while, I was thinking I should add a larger yellow leaf on the bottom, so I switched the smaller one out for a bigger one. And then I was thinking that the photo was getting a little bit lost on the layout, so I thought that adding some pattern paper behind it would help to make it stand out. So I picked a bluish tealish color and I cut it to size. I inked the edges, and then I tucked it back in place behind the title and next to the flamingo. I wanted to give just a tiny bit of dimension to those two largest green leaves, so I just added a little bit of foam tape behind each one. I think there's a lot going on in this layout. There's a whole lot of embellishments, but I wanted to add just a couple of embellishments that weren't leaves. So I looked through all of my summer embellishments. I found this fruity drink that's a Recollection sticker. I also added a lemon sticker, and then I put a very tiny flower on the head of the flamingo. I needed something in the centers of the flowers, and I thought that the pink sequins from the mix looked really nice in the centers. So I used some glossy accents and I glued a sequin in the center of all of those pink flowers. And then I also glued a small pink sequin in the center of the little flower that I put on the flamingo's head. And for some reason, there is no footage of it, but I cut out another color to put on top of the Getaway title. You could still see a little bit of the black around the edges, but I thought that this way that title didn't stand out so much from the rest of the layout. I do like the black splatters though, and I wanted a few more, but I didn't want to start splattering around the layout now after I had done so much, and I didn't want any black splatters on the leaves, so I decided to just apply a few black dots instead of splattering them. So I just dab on a few spots. I'm trying to make them different sizes, and I'm trying not to make them super regular, but it's very hard to imitate splatters when you're painting them on yourself. The layout is almost done, but I kept thinking that I didn't like the way the title looked against the background. I wanted there to be a darker color separating the word tropical from the background. I don't think that it looks bad when I look at the title on the video, but I do think that this did provide a little bit more definition for the title. So I cut out yet another offset for the title, and now I'm inking it using some Distress Oxide in Evergreen Bough. And then I attach the word tropical to the new offset, and then I tuck the title back into the layout and I return some of the embellishments to where they were. And then as a final touch, I add some lime slices, one to the right of the drink and one tucked under the letter G in Getaway, and this layout is complete. Here are some close-ups of the layout. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed it. I know that I'm really enjoying being a guest designer for Spiegelmom Scraps. This is the first of 3 layouts I'm going to be creating in June. I'm looking forward to creating more layouts with these beautiful sequin mixes. You really have to see them in person to appreciate how gorgeous they are. You can check out all of the sequin mixes and the other products for sale at spiegelmomscraps.com. Thanks again for watching. I hope that you have a great day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.